Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. On this podcast, we pull from the seemingly endless queue of movies, television shows, and maybe even other surprises along the way. It's part of our podcast channel from the queue. Tonight, Brian, I hope that you are truly excited because we are going up where we belong as we are reviewing An Officer and a Gentleman.
Zach Mayo had no business defying the odds, let alone beating them.
You ready to quit now, Mayo?
You gotta program yourself. You'll make it.
How did you slip into this program?
You kicked me out of here, but I ain't quitting.
You quit.
But first, you got to get past me. Understand?
Oh, you understand? I love you.
Richard Gere, Debra Winger, An Officer and a Gentleman, rated R.
An Officer and a Gentleman is now showing at these selected theaters. Check newspaper for showtimes.
Please subscribe, like, and review from the queue on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform, especially Spotify and Apple, as you get those algorithms going with positive feedback. You can also find our channel on BlueSky at From the Queue. You can find us through Instagram at From the Queue, as well as Threads. If you're listening to us on YouTube, which we hope you are subscribing to, please, all of our links can be found below. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Instagram at Jerome Cuson. You can find me on BlueSky at JeromeC1985. My co-host is Brian. You can find him on Twitter for now at Brian to Brain. And Brian, all I can say is it has been an emotionally traumatic week, which we are going to address later on this week exclusively on our YouTube channel as we will be reviewing X-Men 97 episodes 5 and 6. It has been an emotionally tragic week. And Brian, we are keeping up the emotions going with the very melodramatic An Officer and a Gentleman.
Love lift us up where we belong, where the eagles cry on a mountain high.
See, the thing is, as soon as I hear that song at the end of the movie, I'm like, why wasn't this actually in the movie? So that's the thing that I'm thinking about throughout. So this is in honor and paying tribute to Louis Gossett Jr. Louis Gossett Jr. won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, the first African-American male to win Best Supporting Actor. So this is our tribute to him. We became big fans of his watching and reviewing the 1989 Punisher movie, but we decided we had to go back and watch this. We are going into a weird territory. Brian and I have not really reviewed a lot of war movies. We really, for many reasons, have not reviewed a lot of romantic dramas, but this kind of encompasses both of those genres.
I mean, it's kind of less of a war movie, right? I mean, there's not really a war going on except that the dude's head, right? Zach Mayo, by the way. But yeah, this movie's really I think it's really good, and I think it stands the test of time. I think it's not like, for me, it's like a 7.5 out of 10, right? Just to get that out of the way. It's not like a 9 out of 10 for me, but I feel like it's got this quality where it's like you can just get engrossed with the character studies of these characters. And just like sit down for like I watched this movie really quick. It felt like a quick 2 hours when I watched this. I was surprised. I thought this was going to be a slow watch, and it just went by fast. And I started having these memories. Like, I think I've watched this movie before, and then I realized I watched it like on Showtime and 2 in the morning, and when I was in 13 or 14 years old. So I thought I'd never watched this before, but then I started getting all those flashbacks back, and certain scenes started to stick out. And yeah, I think this movie does really a really good job of like focusing in on the characters and the story. It's less about the music, and I think that's purposeful, because like you just hear like the theme song that I just sang in small notes throughout the movie, and there's not really a soundtrack throughout the movie. They're just kind of teasing these notes from the song. So I found it really interesting. I think they did it, or Taylor Hackford did it on purpose to kind of focus in on the characters, less about the distractions in the background, and just kind of get deep within the characters, which is weird because if you look at Taylor Hackford's like director or past movies that he's directed, like for example, Ray, obviously that was a heavy heavy focus on music, right? His next two movies, Against All Odds, features Against All Odds by Phil Collins, a big hit, and then his next movie uh, after that was like I forget the title, but it features a big song, "Say You Save Me," from Lionel Richie. So it's like Taylor Hackford knows how to use music really well in movies, but in this case, he did the exact opposite, which made it stand out. And I think that's kind of what I appreciated coming out of this movie. I was like, wow, this is like a very
Is the movie you
anti-soundtrack.
were looking for La Bamba?
No, no, no. It was like, I'm trying to look it up right now, but it was like the
I
next
mean,
year.
even if it's not,
White
that's
Nights.
kind of
White Nights has Gregory Hines. But that does feature that Lionel Richie song too. It's like two back-to-back movies with hit songs. It's like the guy knows what he's doing when he's picking songs for his soundtrack. You know what I'm saying? So I think he did a great job. And then like I said, it's just those few notes in between that kind of teases it, and then it just kicks off at the end perfectly. And then of course it's made fun of by The Simpsons and probably other pop culture references about it later.
it's Simpsons episodes. The one Simpsons episode that is probably the more famous is Marge going into the power plant as the song is playing, so that it mirrors the ending. But there's another Simpsons episode where Bart and Lisa both go to like a junior army thing, and it very much mimics the one of the side plots of this movie. With in that case, it was Bart helping Lisa try to get over the wall, but in this case, it was something very very different. But of course, Richard Gere in the Bart Simpson role, which is not all that dissimilar from Bart Simpson. I mean, the Zach is very similar, but one of the big moments of the movie, even though Seeger is not a very well developed character, like he does get a big moment to shine, and it's a big character moment for Richard Gere as well.
Yeah, so I mean, we're kind of jumping ahead, but I do think that's like probably my favorite scene. Like that was so powerful. It just feels like that Lou Gossett Jr. didn't sell it. Like he was just kind of like he didn't even acknowledge it. Like, good job, Mayo. Good job being a leader, Mayo. And he just never gives Mayo any credit, which I guess is that's the point. It's to inspire him to just work even harder. But man, I wish he just gave him some love for that because that was an incredible moment. It's like he gives up on the record and goes back. It's like Cool Runnings and that kind of sports moment where you give up and just go and help your fallen comrade behind in the race or something like that. Like I thought that was a great moment. So a little bit of a sports moment in there. But I think we got to start proper in the beginning. It's like this movie is based off the writer Douglas Day Stewart, his experiences in the Navy or whatever, and the character Zach Mayo. His mom basically just took a bunch of pills and committed suicide. No note. That's got to be one of the most haunting things a child can go through. Devastating. And then to go to a father that doesn't really want you and who's kind of doing this, I don't know, Navy playboy gimmick up until his like 60s, played by Robert Loggia. And I mean, look, Zach Mayo lived in the Philippines for 10 years as a kid, the character, and they show him in the beginning, and I just couldn't help but think, like, God, this is where my family is. Like, this is kind of their era.
This is what I wanted to ask you about. I was like, what are your feelings on 1982 portrayals of the Philippines?
God, it seems kind of accurate from what my mom has told me and my family. Like, but my mom and her family, like, they come from like an upper class level in the Philippines, in Bani Pangasinan. I'm not exactly sure where they filmed this here, but like it just feels like it's more like street level. But again, you can kind of tell like he's a dude with money, right? He gets robbed, but he's like a white dude. Obviously, white dudes are really like, hey, like get focused on that dude. Let's go. That dude has money, and his dad's got money. So that was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Like two white dudes living in the Philippines in 1982 and just running amok. That sounds like it makes a lot of sense because money runs a lot of shit in the Philippines. Even today, it's corrupted. Like my mom just lost out on like family property that she had her name on when she left the Philippines all those years ago, and she was hoping to come back to that property, but of course someone just paid someone off, wrote their name on the property, and now it's under someone else's name, and it's a whole legal thing that we're probably just have to give up on because that's kind of how the Philippines are. It's like, I hate to say it's corrupt, but it's just one of those places that comes from a culture of living through a dictator up until the 80s, and then a dictator again recently with Duarte. So it's like and then knowing how Filipino politics work, it's basically payout, just whoever pays the most gets the votes. And that's what my mom has been told. And like she even helped her cousin win like a district seat or something in the Philippines and Belize. So I get it, man. So this portrayal, even though my family came in the 70s, this is like 82. It's still like the same kind of like era. So I was just kind of like, wow. And it's not surprising, man, because like I said, white and rich, not necessarily rich, but white and have money in the Philippines in that era. They're just running. He's just running the town. I'm pretty sure his dad was just running shit in that little area of town because man, I can just see it. Like white dudes with money have power in the Philippines, man. That's basically what it boils down to. And then of course with the Marcos thing, that didn't help either. So kind of eye opening, but I was glad to watch it. Kind of like wow, this is kind of where my family comes from, but more on the upper end. But still the street level stuff. It's pretty cruel, man. It's pretty cruel, and it was kind of weird too. They implied that Filipinos know martial arts, but I don't know about that.
A little weird, a little racist.
I think the dude would have just like fucking tackled him and just use his fist. Filipinos don't really have like a style, I guess. We probably do. I'm just not thinking of it, but we kind of just adapt other people's styles.
So Robert Loggia is absolutely tremendous in this movie. He's in it for about 2 minutes, but as I was telling Brian before we started recording, he is the equivalent of bringing in a guy who throws at 105 miles an hour in the first inning, strikes out 3 hitters on 9 pitches, and just absolutely gets this movie off to a roaring start. I think that what he is able to do here, and then I think Louis Gossett Jr. kind of picks up the mantle, is just add a lot of great energy, be somebody really good for Richard Gere to play off of, because the essence of this movie, in my mind, is that Richard Gere. I'm gonna do something. You're gonna love this, Brian. I'm about to compare Richard Gere to Becky Lynch. Do you wanna hear this?
Go for it, because I have missed the last 5 or 6 years of WWE storylines. So you got to inform me on this one.
So here's the thing: Richard Gere is not a great actor. He is a great movie star. Becky Lynch is not a great wrestler. She is a great star. They carry themselves like stars. They act like stars. But if you watch a Becky Lynch match, you're not going to always get like the best match. You watch a Richard Gere movie, you're not always going to get the best movie. I think the reason that this movie works as well as it does is because he has a lot of really great actors to play off of. And in this case, he has Robert Loggia at the beginning, he has Louis Gossett Jr., and he has Debra Winger. And both of those people were nominated for Academy Awards, well deserved. I think those are 2 very strong performances, and I think Gere is elevated because of the people that he gets to play off of. And another character actor, David Keith, I think he also has a very good platonic chemistry with him as well. So I think that's why this movie works as well as it does. I think it is the problem with this movie is that it's a decent enough kind of romantic drama. It's a decent enough war, quote unquote, war movie. But you don't really get either one of them in great spades, so I think that's what prevents it from being something truly special. But what do I know? This movie was budgeted at $7 million, Brian. It grossed $190 million in 1982, third highest grossing movie of that year.
And you know what? It's rated R. So who knew? Who knew? Sometimes an R rating doesn't hurt. You know what I'm saying? Like in this case, it drew the adult audience, and there was definitely some sexy scenes, but those sexy scenes were really well done, I thought, and like very intimate and very like character driven, and like it really explored their characters. So I think that's what I really like about this movie. Like I said, it's like very much a character study of like the main characters, not even just Zach Mayo, the Richard Gere character, because even Debra Winger's character is fascinating. I really love the David Keith character. I think him playing this character Sid, which is kind of weird because in Major League 2 I always compared him to Sid Vicious with his face. I think he steals the show, honestly. Like I feel like he really stole the show and he didn't get the nomination for supporting actor. It could have been a duel, both of them him and Lou Gossett probably could have gotten it. But of course they went Lou Gossett, but that's fine. He totally deserved it as well. But I thought I was just so impressed because I'm just used to seeing David Keith as like this, a heel, a bad guy with the serious face in all these movies. But in this case, it's like you see his vulnerable side, And I guess that's, as I've gotten older, it's like I like these out of these rough, tough actors. Like you see their vulnerable side. That's probably why we love Creed so much with Sylvester Stallone. In this case, it was David Keith, and I was shocked because like he's very vulnerable. He plays a tough guy, but he also plays like the guy that's looking out for his friends, and especially like I forget that one dude's name from NYPD Blue. Like he nearly dies in drowning, and he's like showing concern, and he's like he was really concerned about his friend. So I thought this guy really cares. He's not just this asshole who happens to be cheating, knowingly cheating, but he's not this asshole that we perceive him to be in other movies. So that was kind of like a refresher for me. And then the tragic ending of his character and all that, what happens. We'll get into that in a bit. But I think he did a really great job, honestly. And I think he actually did better than the Debra Winger and Louis Gossett, honestly, because I just wasn't expecting it. And it was this vulnerable performance. And especially when he's talking to Lynette towards the end of the movie, and Lynette turns him down, and she's like, "I never loved you. I lied about the baby." I was like, "Oh my god!" And you can just see his like whole life just like flash before his eyes. Like, what have I done? So I thought he did a great job, especially like communicating with his face. So, yeah. And the rest of the plot is kind of like, wow. Like, I don't know if this is like gonna be a 2024 kind of thing. Like the whole lying about being pregnant. I don't know. Weird vibes. But it seems like that comes from a real place. I don't know, because I have heard stories of like my mom has told me, like there has been some friends that she had that kind of like try to get pregnant with like GIs visiting kind of thing. So it's just like, what do you mean, like why? Just so they can try to get to the States. And it's like, wow, okay. So it's weird, but I guess it's a real thing that these women wanted to get pregnant and be Navy wives. So it's just kind of weird, but it threw me for a loop a little bit. But I was willing to accept the plot by the end because it does seem like a real tragic story for both Lynette and Sid.
I think that's one of the reasons this movie feels out of time. This comes out in 1982. Apparently, this is a script that's been buzzing around for 8 years. So you have to figure this is a script that's being written around at the end of the Vietnam War. And our perception of the military is very different in 1982 compared to where we are in 2024. I think that there is a very negative attitude coming out of Vietnam about the armed forces. And you compare this movie even to 4 years later. Just 4 years later, Top Gun comes out and completely changes the perception of the Air Force, the Navy, the Army. And it's just a really fascinating watch to compare this to something like Top Gun. I think a lot of the DNA of this movie also is in Top Gun. And it's funny because I think you get a very similar vibe. You get a very similar relationship. But obviously, Louis Gossett Jr. is much more in the vein of, R. Lee Ermey in Full Metal Jacket. Like, he's just very un-PC. And I feel like this is one of the reasons that we don't get these kinds of movies. Like, we do get war movies, but we don't get these kinds of war movies where they start out at basic training, because I just don't feel like writers are willing to go to this very un-PC place where they're using epithets. And you get a lot of epithets. And even in the conversation between Debra Winger and Richard Gere, like they are calling themselves like by what could be construed as kind of racist names. And it's a really interesting kind of time capsule into that time period. And I'm not saying, like, I am not using these terms, but put within the context, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing that they're using these terms. And I think what makes this movie good, in my view, is the relationships. And some I think are better than others, but I think Richard Gere just really plays off of everybody else extremely well. I think he's very charismatic. I think he just brings that movie star quality, and you can see why he, over the next 10 years or so, why he had such a big time career. And again, I don't think he's one of our best actors ever, but certainly you see where the charisma is. And I mean, Debra Winger, very similarly, I think she is really good here. And she has quite a run here in the first half of the decade with this urban cowboy in terms of endearment. This movie does kind of make me want to go on a Debra Winger run, and I think that this is just it's a very solid movie. Is this one of my favorite movies of the 1980s? It is not, but I think it's consistently watchable. The performances are very good. Goes to some dark places at times. but the performances are really good. And that's really what is a hallmark of a lot of successful movies of this era of the 1980s, is just putting movie stars in a situation where they can find success. And in my view, this movie is mostly successful. But as mentioned, we are doing this as a tribute to Louis Gossett Jr., who recently passed away. I know that he is one of my favorites, so I do want to put a little bit of focus on his character. You know, he starts out as the drill sergeant, the stereotypical, very angry individual who's just trying to get people to quit his unit, and he kind of slowly softens up and is able to be a quality leader, I guess, kind of. And Richard Gere or Zach Mayo is very appreciative of him in the end. I'm not sure if that scene at the end is earned between the two of them, but I think that what makes this movie work is just the way that it starts with Foley kind of in this role. And Brian, I do have to say that knowing that his last name is Foley, in my head canon, I kept thinking, what if he is like an uncle to Axel Foley, and how amazing that would be.
Trust me, I keep thinking that Stripes and this movie take place in the same universe, and they don't. But again, Stripes is like the comedic version, sort of what this movie is, right? But and it goes way over the top by the end of that movie. But in this case, yeah, you never know. I like to connect universes. You know, I think about the age where I can see actors in similar movies and be like, oh yeah, maybe Danny Glover had this really weird escapade with an alien in between, you know, Lethal Weapon 2 and 3. You never know. And also went into the future. But I like to connect the dots sometimes. But yeah, I really like the relationship between Foley and Seeger, because I feel like with that relationship, it shows you Seeger's not a bad guy. Because I think if you watch the first couple scenes with him as the drill sergeant and just not giving a fuck and saying all those things, and only two things come from Oklahoma, and I'm not going to fill in the blanks for that one. But yeah, like, I think once you see how he treats Seeger, it shows you, oh, this dude has a heart. He's not this asshole. He's just trying to motivate people. And he feels bad for Seeger because he knows that Seeger has the heart and determination. She just doesn't have the physical strength to pull it off yet. And he knows that. Like, he tells even Richard Gere, like, you got to be more like Seeger. Like, she knows that she can't do all these things physically. You can.
He breaks kayfabe. Like, that's what he does in that moment. He's breaking kayfabe and just be like, keeping it real. Like, she's got more heart and determination. You're an asshole.
Yeah, I love that scene, man. And that's, I think, the Seeger character, I think, might have been a throwaway character, but when she gets her full arc and goes over the wall, and the relationship she has with Seeger and then the rest of the crew, like, it really shows, like, oh, she's like an example. She's a prime example of how great of a leader and trainer that Louis Gossett Jr. is. That's, you know, that's with Foley. Like, he's a great motivator, and he motivated her, and then he sees that kind of like thing in Mayo, and he's like not giving up on him by pushing him to the limit. He knows that, like, he's not going to give up despite all the things he's doing in that weekend torture when he caught him, you know, selling clean boots and all that kind of thing, and the belt buckles and all that stuff. It's weird too, because that's kind of like part of Zach's arc, right? It's like he's got this self-destructive nature to him that comes from his bad relationship with his father, right? And he's unable to hold stable relationships for a long time until he has to learn how to do it with Debra Winger, and she brings it out of him. So I love that arc, man, and that little middle part of him, like, I got nowhere else to go. It's the famous quote, but it actually makes a lot of sense for the character to say that in that moment, because he feels like he's got nowhere else to go. He's had like shitty relationships all of his life, and he's got this guy yelling at him, and he's trying to motivate him, and he's really starting to realize, hey, maybe he's trying to motivate me. But we get to the third act, and my God, they just did the Eat Man 4 ending. Just a fucking fight in front of the crew. I don't know, man. That kind of lowered it from like an 8.5 to a 7.5 for me, because I was like, this is where we're going with this ending. Like, we're not bringing his father
really
back.
And like, they fight, and then the next scene he's thanking him. It doesn't work.
No, and they should have brought Robert Loggia back to give Richard Gere his fucking closure, man. That's what I was expecting, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Why are we
Robert Loggia to be Robert Closer?
Oh yes, closure. Yeah, that would have been incredible. You know what I mean? But they didn't do that, And they set it up at the beginning because, like, I'll be, close. You can come visit me. And he's like, what do you want? A pat on the back from your father, kid? And yeah, like that's what he wanted. That's what I wanted by the end, but we didn't get it. But I guess, is that a realistic ending? Like some relationships with their fathers don't get settled.
Sometimes they don't materialize. I'm just saying that Richard Gere, his hair at the beginning of this movie, I've been wig watch guy lately on the show. His hair at the beginning of this is absolutely incredible, and him having to shave his head is borderline tragic in my view.
He's got a spectacular set of hair, definitely, and even
to this
even
day.
in what in Pretty Woman, like his hair is still fucking fly, and even in the what's that other one where he also with Julia Roberts in the late '90s, I forget, Dr. T and the Women, maybe.
It's the wedding movie.
His hair is still spectacular with the white. So look, we're getting older. We got to appreciate older people's hair. We're getting to that age. I guess we got to start putting more product. I don't know, but that dude know what to do with his hair, and that's probably why he's got the movie star looks.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. What if, like in another 1982 movie, what if Louis Gossett Jr. had told Richard Gere, "There is no tomorrow"?
Oh boy. Okay, well, you never know. But I do think Louis Gossett Jr., like, I don't know. I feel like he had a stronger performance in Punisher, as weird as that sounds. But
I think that he just, the thing is that this movie is actually kind of good, and there's a lot of really good moments in it. And for me, like that's why his performance doesn't maybe stand out as much, because he's actually surrounded by other good performances. And again, I think Debra Winger is pretty underrated in this movie. She apparently hates this movie, which I kind of can understand, because the relationship, if you really break it down, the relationship with Richard Gere, I don't know that it all together works. It doesn't all together function.
9 weeks. It's a 9-week romance. It's like a summer fling gimmick, but it's written by a dude. It's written by a dude, and then from the Navy. So there's the perspective. Also, it should have been best supporting, right? It should have been best supporting and not lead actress again.
This is the problem with the lead actor. This is a general problem with the lead category for actresses, is that they don't have the kind of roles that the dudes do. So you end up with something very much like this.
And the marketing, of course, because she was hot off of Urban Cowboy at the time. So it's understandable.
The other thing is that from a marketing perspective of yourself, it is better for you to go for the lead category as opposed to the supporting category, so that you continue to be perceived as a lead performer. That's why Lily Gladstone went for Best Lead Actress for Killers of the Flower Moon. Even though she didn't win, she's trying to create the perception of herself as a lead actress. So I think it makes sense from their perspective.
Yeah, I guess that's what the Silence of the Lambs gimmick did too. But to me, I think you should stick to the time, whatever. There's supposed to be certain rules about the amount of time on screen, but I don't think they ever apply those rules sometimes. So whatever, man. Because I think there was another one. I think the Hours had like Best Actress for Nicole Kidman, when she clearly, by the time stamp, should have been Best Supporting. So I'm just a stickler for that kind of thing. But yeah, overall, I think that it deserved the nominations it got. Richard Gere not getting the lead nomination, I'm cool with that. I don't think he deserved it, but he's definitely the guy who brought everyone together and held everything together in this movie. It's just a weird ending, man. Like, why have a karate fight? Like, made no sense. Like, what? I don't know if that was what kind of influence that came from. So that's just so random. That was the only thing.
I mentioned that it's not the best war movie, and that's because there's of course no war being fought. So it just feels like they felt obligated to have some sort of an action scene between, like there had to be some sort of a climactic fight. Why couldn't it just be a fight though? Why did it have to be a martial arts fight?
Yeah, so I don't know. It was just so strange.
It been, like, fighting in
it's
the
also
mud.
strange that it got Best Original Score nomination, which is fascinating because, like I mentioned, it's just the one song and just they play the couple notes just to tease it until they play it at the end. So who knows, man?
But if this movie comes out a few years later, there is an anthem, like the end credit song is treated as an anthem for the whole movie. And again, it's really fascinating to me that it feels like you're just missing that, and then you get it in the end credits. Nonetheless, though, this movie very much feels like it is a product of its time, and I am very, very curious to see where we end up in terms of, where does this movie end up in terms of like Richard Gere's career and Debra Winger's career? Because I mean, this has been parodied on The Simpsons on two different occasions, and pop culturally, I think it's been raised recently because of Louis Gossett's death. I feel like some people have checked this movie out. So it's just fascinating to think about this movie that is now 42 years old, and I think there are parts of it that have aged well. There are other parts of it that maybe haven't aged so well. But it is a fascinating exploration into a very different time in Hollywood.
Also got to mention, like, cinematography is pretty good. It wasn't like spectacular because that's not what this movie's asking for, but for like, to shoot a town off a coast, I think that's, you think of Hitchcock, you think of John Carpenter with The Fog. So there's something about towns on a shoreline that kind of get me like a little bit. I think they had the one in Top Gun 2 or something like that. Like I dig that look and vibe. So it matched the movie fine.
For sure. So that's our thoughts on An Officer and a Gentleman, and I have to believe that we will get into romantic dramas at some point on this podcast. I'm sure we will do another one. I mean, Brian, I guess X-Men '97 is kind of a romantic drama, so I guess we'll be talking about that show later on this week exclusively for our YouTube subscribers.
God, that fucked me up. That episode fucked me up.
We are not going to spoil episode.
I know, but that's just the tease. Man, that was brutal. But hopefully time travel. But next week we're doing something a little different, right? I think I'm hosting, right? Is that correct?
Next week we're staying in the same decade. We are fast forwarding a few years.
What we're doing? I thought next week is the Apes double feature, correct?
Well, yes, actually, we're going backwards in time. 2 weeks from now, we're doing baseball, or we're doing Major League from 1989. But next week, we are doing a very special Apes double feature because this actually will lead into something we are doing for the month of May. We have reviewed the modern Apes trilogy that is pretty incredible, but we have never reviewed any of the classic Apes movies. The first Planet of the Apes has been talked to death. The second one is not very good. So we are going to do Escape from the Planet of the Apes, the third one, and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, which might be one of the most underrated movies ever made. That's my hot take.
Yeah, and listen, man, what's his name? Ricardo Montalban? We kind of forget that this dude has been in 2 successful sci-fi franchises, and he's been a big part of 3. He was a big part of 3 and 4 of Planet of the Apes. So, and then of course he's got that lingering thing with Khan from 2 to 4. Even though he dies in 2 in Star Trek, he's still lingering in the background of the repercussions in 3 and 4. So this guy's got a sci-fi history that no one really talks about, even like Fantasy Island. I feel like everyone just thinks of Khan, but no one thinks of him as this great I forget his name in the Planet of the Apes movies, but he's a great supporting character to the apes in the Planet of the Apes movies. And these are the 2 movies that I think me and Jerome responded to the most as children when we watched these, because like Escape from the Planet of the Apes has time travel and one of the saddest endings that I've ever seen in my life. But then Conquest has like this deep meaning that you don't really pick up on until like later on when you start learning about like civil rights movement and all these different things. And you kind of compare it to like what's going on in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. It's very subtle, but I feel like they really like got this tone down about this really deeper sci-fi than the previous movies.
Planet of the Apes subtle? I don't think that movie is subtle, my man.
Conquest? I don't know. So yeah, I'm excited. I think these are the 2 movies that me and Jerome responded to the most as a kid. I think Conquest is like a great time travel movie with a sad ending. And then, Escape from the Planet of the Apes has the time travel with the sad ending. Conquest has this great revolt at the end with the apes kind of coming together, and it's the son of Caesar, or the son of is it Caesar? Cornelius, the son of Cornelius, doing the revolt. So I haven't seen them in a while, but those are definitely my two favorites as a kid, and I know they're two of the favorite sequels of you, Jerome. So we're looking forward to that. We're not going to watch the fifth one. The fifth one is not that great at all. I think the makeup in that movie
really bad.
The fifth one has terrible makeup, but somehow the show has better makeup than the fifth movie. We could talk about that next
movie, there are only two bad Planet of the Apes movies. The Tim Burton version is by far the worst. And this Battle for the Planet of the Apes is also pretty bad. Beneath is borderline. It's not great, but I would not say it's bad.
It's weird. I think it's an acid trip, honestly, because it's got a lot of Godzilla elements to it. And yeah, Godzilla movies at that time were fucking weird with like underwater people. And this one had what? It had under earth people from like the radiated leftovers of the war.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I'm hoping they make a return in the next one. Not really, but
hey man, we'll see, because this seems like a new storyline for the new movie, which we'll talk about once we do the rankings. But I'm excited for next week, and I'll be hosting, and I'll put the notes together because it's gonna be a fun double feature. And guess what? They're both 90-minute movies. Yay!
Yeah, that's the best part. All right, so for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. Brian, or I guess Joe Cocker, take us out.
Love lift us up where we belong. And the eagle